Hi everyone, thank you for joining us on today's webinar. My name is Bethany and I'm the Relationship and Engagement Manager here at UMI, and today I'm joined by my colleague Ash, who is our digital journalist.
Hi everyone.
Here at UMI we help businesses by taking the hard work out of finding the very best expertise, information and finance. That's why we're here today with one of the very best experts on bidding. Before we dive in, if you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the Q&A chat box in your Zoom control panel and we'll try and answer them as we go. Now, without further ado, today we're here to discuss the tender market and the opportunities that lie within it. And on that note, I'd like to introduce our guest. So today we have Tim from Bid and Research Development. So hi Tim, would you like to tell us a little bit more about yourself and what you do?
Hello, I remembered to unmute there. So my name's Tim. I have a couple of companies. I have Bid and Research Development, which is a specialist bid writing consultancy. We've been going for around 7 years now. We help companies from a whole range of different sectors to bid for and try and win public sector contracts mainly. So that's contracts with the NHS, housing associations, local authorities, universities, things like that. And we have a company called Opportuni. So Opportuni is a service where you sign up, you subscribe on a monthly or annual basis, you put in your search terms and it brings relevant tender opportunities direct to the subscriber. So we've got a service which helps you find the tenders and a service which helps you to win them should you need that support.
That's great. Thanks very much, Tim. So we'll just get started. Can you tell us a little bit about what bidding is and what it entails?
Yeah. Okay. So we work primarily in public sector bidding. Private sector bidding happens as well, but public sector is where we specialize. So anything that the public sector wants to buy, so anything the NHS is buying or your local council is buying, that can be anything from cleaning the windows at the civic centre to security guards at your local shopping centre to fixing the roads, collecting your waste, to providing people that work for hospitals with pens, literally anything and everything. It goes through a bidding process. So the public sector uses the bidding process to make sure that there's a fair and transparent way of purchasing products and services. So typically anything over £10,000 in value that they're going to buy, they'll put it out to tender. The tender process is very, very similar to a job application, really, how they advertise exactly what they want online through tender portals rather than job portals. They outline exactly what it is they want. And then people that can provide that provide a submission, which is typically a description of how they're going to provide the service. So a written submission, which is usually anything from a few thousand words up to hundreds of thousands of words, depending on the complexity of the product or service, and their price for delivering that service. So anything they want to buy, they advertise it publicly, and anyone that thinks they can provide that service is actively encouraged to submit a response to try and win that contract and deliver that product or service.
Great. And so what are the benefits of bidding then?
So there's quite a few benefits. So where to start? I mean, the public sector spend £264 billion every year. So if you want to do work with the public sector, I don't guarantee you're going to get all 264 billion by any means, but if you want to access that marketplace and those opportunities, bidding for contracts is the first place to start. So there's 264 billion, and a third of that must be spent with small and medium-sized businesses. So the government made a commitment that by 2020, I believe, or 2021, they would spend a third of their budget with SME businesses. So that equates to £88 billion a year, or £340 million a week. So there's lots of companies out there who anything down from micro one-man band type businesses right up to huge multinational businesses delivering all kinds of products and services. the benefits can be things like, so the average contract value is £164,000 over a 3-year period, which is a bit more, I always think, easier to understand than thinking about billions, because I don't know what a billion is. I've never seen a billion. It's too many numbers, too many zeros. But 164,000, any business owner would say, actually, that's a good sized contract, and that's your average contract that's out there. But having a public sector client can be beneficial in that you typically secure a longer term contract. So the average contract is usually around 3 years. And in the current climate, having a 3-year contract with anyone that is pretty good going, to be honest. The public sector are traditionally good at paying on time within 30 days. And the public sector aren't, they're not going to go anywhere. If you have a contract with a private company, they could change their mind next week. Even if they signed into a contract, they could cancel those contracts. It's very, very rare that public sector contracts are cancelled unless you're failing to deliver what it is you've said you'll deliver. So right now, from a kind of stability point of view, public sector contracts can be great. And it's a great way of growing your business quite rapidly. So you can go out there and network and try and find business, but actually public sector contracts tend to be pretty sizable, and there's nothing stopping you bidding for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of those in your region, outside your region. And you don't have to do that initial relationship building, because I always say bid writing's been socially distancing for years, because it's literally just all online. You don't get to see the other person face to face. You don't take them out for lunch. You can't chat to them at a networking event. So there's benefits right now, I think, more than ever.
And Tim, do you find once you've secured the first contract, is it kind of like a foot in the door? Are you then kind of like in a position to get more and more work?
Yeah, I think securing the first one is a great first step. Because if you've got a contract, say, with Sunderland Council, and then an opportunity comes up with Newcastle Council, and you're doing a great job with Sunderland, and it's a similar service, you've got a great track record of delivering to a similar organisation, a similar contract, and that can only be beneficial. Getting the first one, there's obviously the process is about convincing them that you're capable of delivering a product or service. And getting your first one, if it's say £100,000 contract and you're a medium-sized business and all your contracts are smaller, there's ways you can say, actually, to deliver 5 £20,000 contracts is technically more complex than delivering one £100,000 contract, and you can convince them that way. But it's always much easier to go, yes, we've already got a contract like this and we're doing great. Mm-hmm. So you do find that it can be a bit of a domino effect, that once someone wins their first one, there's nothing stopping them expanding out into other regions and other areas. So yeah, it's definitely a foot in the door.
So with that in mind, then, how can business owners make the decision on what to bid for?
So there's a number of different things that we tend to look at to help people decide what they should and shouldn't bid for. The first thing is, obviously, can you deliver it? There's not the last thing you want to do is write a dream to a local authority that you're going to deliver something, and then it comes to it, and actually you think, how on earth are we going to do this? So first thing, is it deliverable? Can you do it? Are you just kidding yourself? We look at the value of contracts and try and make decisions based on that. So here we go. I'm going to do some numbers here. Numbers aren't my strong point. It's mainly words. We get involved in the writing. So if you're looking at a public sector contract, quite often we get people coming to us saying, "Oh, I found £1 million contract. It looks brilliant." And I go, "Great. What's your turnover?" And they say, "Oh, 250,000. I mean, that's just not going to work. It's not realistic. The public sector are not going to take a risk on giving you a contract that significantly increases your company size hugely. We tend to look at around 40% of your turnover. So if you're a £100,000 turnover company, look at a £40,000 per year contract. So if it's a 3-year contract, £120,000 opportunity. And that's usually a good thing to look at to try and understand, is this reasonable? Are they going to take a chance on me? Is it too much of a risk? Because the public sector are spending public money, they're spending our taxes, and they have a responsibility to do that in a responsible way, to give the contracts to people who can actually deliver. So looking at the finances up front is usually a good indicator. There's other things that you can look at in terms of, they always come with a specification document which outlines exactly what you need to do. So if you are a security company, for example, and you look at the specification and it entails a part of security that you've not done or you don't do, can you do it? Again, it comes back to that, is it deliverable? There's certain things to consider around the types of questions that you're being asked and why you're being asked them. Most tender processes are very transparent, they're very fair, but look at the questions and try and understand why they're asking the questions. So if you've got questions around how will you deliver the contract, how will you manage health and safety, how will you manage environmental factors, how are you going to benefit the local community, they're all fairly generic questions, and that's fine. But if there's a consistent theme that's outside of the generic questions, like how will you deliver the contract and report performance, how will you manage health and safety and report performance, and reporting performance is coming up again and again, you might think, actually, the person that's delivered this previously hasn't reported to them very well. So there's a real chance here that we should go for this because we're really good at reporting. Or we can certainly tell them we are and make sure we are. So if you look at the types of questions they're asking and think about why. Another thing is the tender is typically broken down into the quality side of things, which is the written submission, and the commercial, which is the price. And they're given a weighting. Typically it's 50-50, marked on 50% quality, 50% price. Sometimes it's 60-40 one way or another. But if it's any more than that, you've got to think why. So if it's 80-90% based on price, you've got to think, is this the opportunity for me? Am I the cheapest in the marketplace? Do I want to be the cheapest in the marketplace? Or do I want to focus on a blend of quality and price? Mm-hmm. So look at that breakdown to try and understand, are you in a competition for quality and price, or just quality, and make a judgment based on that and based on how you want to be positioned in the marketplace. Me personally, I'd always look for things with higher quality score and a lower price rating, because then you know that they're focused on, can you actually do a really good job rather than just, can you do the cheapest job? But that's just a few little things that we look out for to try and decide what to bid for, what not to bid for.
Great. So on reflection of that then, what tips would you give around writing a submission?
Okay, so lots of companies struggle with writing a submission, and one of the main challenges is you come to a tender process and they're asking for a certain service and you've got all kinds of ideas about what you want to tell them. You know that you're great at this, you've done that, you've done the other, and you just want to tell them. Now you've got to take a step back and say, never mind what I want to tell them, because this isn't about me, it's about them. So what are they asking me for? The most common reason that people don't win a tender submission is they don't answer the questions, which sounds really silly, but if you ever try and do a tender submission, you'll understand, because you've got all these things that you know you're good at that you think, oh, they'll benefit so much if they knew about this and that. But you've just got to make sure that you answer exactly what they're asking for. So the way that we do that to make sure that we are answering the questions is we try and break down the questions into more manageable sections. So say you've got a question which says, in 1,000 words, describe how you'll deliver the service. Now, most companies will think, well, we could talk about any number of different things, but it's actually really hard to stay on topic for 1,000 words. If you ever tried to write 1,000 words about one topic, you end up going up in all different types of tangents. So we focus on saying, structure your response. Look in the specification document, which explains what they want, and try and put in some subheadings there. So instead of having a 1,000 word response, you might break it down into 5 subsections of 200 words each. Then you can make sure that you're answering exactly what they've asked, and it's aligning to the question and to the specification of exactly what they want. Now, under each of those headings, we then use an approach to try and say, yes, we can do what you want. This is how we're going to do it. And this is what we've done previously to give you confidence that we can do it again. So in tackling a bid, we try to put a lot of emphasis on building the structure for how you're going to respond, and see that as being a really important step to set you off in the right direction before you just pick up a pen and start, well, pick up your keyboard and start typing. You know, have an approach that's thought out to make sure that you are answering things. And look at the marking criteria. They'll usually tell you an excellent response includes this, this, and this, and it'll give you a description of what an excellent response is. And just when you're writing, think about that. An excellent response might say, yes, you'll deliver the service, but you add some value. So every time you're writing, we can do this, like, but how can we add some value as well? What can we do that's above and beyond that to make sure that this response is excellent instead of just a good response?
And do you think it's difficult then to put across, say, your business's personality when you're submitting a tender?
It depends. It depends on each tender is different. It depends on what the purchasing organization asks you for. Sometimes you've got a bit more freedom to express yourself, and other times you haven't. So if you've got a larger word count, for example, you can talk more about how you'll deliver and align in your values, and talking about your company, your ethos, and the culture that you've built. Whereas if you're restricted on word count, say you've got 100 words to describe something, you're literally quite often restricted to just describing that as succinctly as you possibly can, and it doesn't leave much room for talking about I guess some of the more fuzzy things that you would talk about if it was a business to business relationship, where you try and relate to one another and you try and relate your businesses and align and ensure that you've got a similar purpose. But it very much depends on the question. I always say you should try, if you can, to show some of that about your business, because I think it's an added value. If you're someone that's just going to go and do the job, that's fine. But if you're someone that's going to go and do the job and you've got similar values and similar approach and similar ethos to business, then I think that can work in your favor if the questions allow you to do that.
Yeah.
I just asked him, how you compared it to writing a CV? I know a lot of bigger companies, when it won't be like, individual people reading the CV, they'll kind of like put it through a scanner and process it. Is that the same with tender bids, or does it depend on the organization?
Yeah, it can be. So you might have 5 questions, and sometimes in the documentation it'll say each question is marked in isolation, which would mean that your question about delivery might be marked by someone who's going to oversee delivery of the service. The health and safety response might be obviously reviewed by their health and safety expert.
Yeah.
You've got to write each question as a separate piece, rather than as people quite often say, oh, my questions don't flow together, but actually they don't need to flow together. And if you need to repeat yourself in one question and another question to get your point across, that's fine. Mm-hmm. So it is similar to very similar to the recruitment process in many ways. So make sure, and that comes back to that thing about, have you answered the question? You might read a question and say, oh, well, I've answered that in question 2 and this is question 4, but the person reading question 4 probably hasn't read question 2. So yes.
So if we just go right back to the beginning of the process, I know we've talked a bit in length about the writing of it, but when it comes to just finding the tenders, where can businesses go and how do they find them?
Okay, so there are just short of 3,600 tender portals in the UK, which causes a bit of a challenge. I mean, there's different portals for different organisations across the country. So the NHS has got hundreds of different portals, and each local authority's got different ones. I mean, in the Northeast here, we've got a NEPO, which is NEPO, Northeast Procurement Organisation, and that covers the majority of the local authority contracts in the Northeast. You've got similar in the Northwest, where you've got a portal called the Chest. But I think if you are looking to get started and you want a few portals to look on, there's a central government register called Contracts Finder. Contracts Finder lists probably between 40 and 60% of the government's public sector opportunities. But yeah, keeping track on all of those manually is not possible. You know, we always try and encourage people to pick a sector that they're keen on. You know, if you're keen to work in the housing sector, look up housing procurement portals. If you're keen to work in a particular region, see if there's a particular portal for that region. If it's universities, the universities have usually their own procurement portal, and then they might have a portal which they use collectively. So there's a Northern procurement portal for the universities. So we've got a company called Opportunity, which we mentioned briefly at the beginning. We charge a monthly subscription or an annual subscription, and that uses artificial intelligence and machine learning to look at all of the tenders across the UK. So people that are subscribed set their keywords. So if you're a training organisation, you'd set training, you'd set all the different types of training that you deliver, and you'd set the geographic areas you deliver. So you might say Northeast, Yorkshire and Humber, Northwest. The software searches the market, finds things with those keywords in those locations, and brings it back to us. So we've built learning algorithms in there, so that if you are a training company, it knows that training and train building are different things. So the algorithm is really accurate in picking out the right tender opportunities. They're then quality checked and sent through to people's inboxes. But pretty soon they'll be sent to people's phones as well through push notifications as well. So that can save people a lot of time. I don't want to plug too much, but if you want to know some more, check out opportunity.co.uk or just drop me a message.
That sounds really good.
Yeah.
Great.
And so I know we mentioned the importance of value fit earlier, but what are the other key considerations when choosing a tender, would you say?
Yeah, I think it's important to have some kind of strategy and some kind of approach. Quite often people get, I suppose, attracted by shiny objects. It's like, oh, there's a big tender, I want to go for that. But I think there's so many opportunities out there. It's quite important to have an understanding of what it is that you want to bid for and where it is you want to bid for, and try and stick to that. Of course, be responsive to opportunities, but try and be proactive and find out, well, when is a tender due to be renewed? And there's ways of finding out. You know, if anyone wants to find out when a particular contract is due to renew, feel free to get in touch and we can show you the process. It's probably a bit challenging to explain now, but you can find out when a contract's due to expire, and you can say, right, Newcastle Council, we really want to go for that contract. Stockton Council, we really want to go for that. London, we want to go for Hackney's contract. And to have a bit of an approach, I think that's quite important, rather than just going, oh, there's a contract in Devon and you've never been to Devon, you've never delivered in Devon, but it's a great contract, let's just go for it. I think people sometimes face challenges when they are a bit scattergun. Another thing which we sometimes hear people say is, oh, we'll just go for lots. We'll just go for loads of tenders and something will stick. And we discourage that. It's much better to put real time and effort into one opportunity and to have a really good chance of winning it than to go for 20 and to have, you know, a half-baked tender submitted, because there will be someone out there that's really trying. And if you just put in, you know, a little bit of effort and do it lots of times, you're going to waste lots and lots of time and energy bidding for lots of things that you're most likely going to be unsuccessful with. Whereas if you go, right, there's this one opportunity, we really want to go for it, we're going to set aside a number of days to actually give it some time and attention, then we think that is a much better approach. Another thing to consider when people are bidding is, if you've written a bid before and it's been successful, it doesn't mean that same set of text will be successful again. So quite often we talked about with Ash, I think you were asked if one contract can be a foot in the door to another. And one thing we see quite regularly is people bid for a contract and they'll be successful. And then they'll go, right, we've got winning content. And they'll find another opportunity and they'll go, we've got an answer for that. And they'll copy it out of the old one, they'll paste it in the new one, and they'll press submit and they'll lose, and they'll go, well, that one scored full marks last time. Why is it not scored full marks this time? And it's about recognizing that you need to give each opportunity the time and attention that it needs, and write into the questions and to the specification, not the questions and the specification of the previous one, because that might be completely different.
Yeah, totally. So can anybody bid for a tender opportunity?
Yes, they can. So,
but should they?
Only if they can deliver and if they can do a good job. Yeah. I mean, the local authorities, there's a common belief that you need to have 2 or 3 years worth of accounts to be able to bid for a contract. Now that's preferable, but you can bid for an opportunity without those years worth of accounts. If, for example, you can provide a forecast from an accountant, or if you can provide a guarantee, or if you can provide a performance bond. There's a number of companies out there who can provide performance bonds. I mean, there's a company called FW Capital that can help with that, and a number of other organizations. So you can go for contracts even if you're a brand new organization. But usually 2 or 3 years worth of trading is a good kind of benchmark for an entry to the bidding market. Because by that point, you've got some track record, you've got some experience, you can talk about what you've done, you can use references to people that you've worked with before. But yeah, anyone can bid. There's certain disqualifying factors. So each submission will come with a questionnaire around the company to make sure you've got the right policies and procedures in place, to make sure you've got the right insurance levels, to make sure that you aren't being chased by the taxman for unpaid tax, things like that. And those can be disqualifying factors. So if you've got some complicated legal things going on where you've maybe done something wrong, or you've been convicted of something, that can rule you out of the bidding process as well.
And so we've touched on, the quality of your answers when you submit, and then also the delivery side of things. But what are the most common reasons for people not winning tenders?
Yeah, so the most common reasons not answering the questions, and that's usually because either people have some responses that they want to use that they've written before and they don't put the time and attention in, or it can be that they've got their own agenda of what they want to tell the organization. So that's probably the main reason, to be honest. The bidding process is very much a process. It's not a human to human interaction. It's a process. It's a point scoring exercise. There's the old comedy sketch of computer says no, but it is very much like that. It's like, have you done that? No, you haven't. You haven't got a point. And there's a marking criteria, and if you don't hit that marking criteria, which they give you, then you're not going to score a point, and computer will say no. So it's making sure that it's written to the opportunity, making sure you understand the marking criteria, and you say you're going to do what they want you to do rather than what you want to give them. So that's probably the most common reason, I would say.
And Tim, I know there's been a lot about this in the press recently, but is bidding a fair process, or do organisations already know who they're going to pick?
Yes, it is a fair process 99% of the time. I mean, like anything, there's always going to be one, and it's those one scenario that you'll hear of because someone will talk about it, and there's that saying that it takes a lifetime to build a reputation, it takes a moment to ruin it, and it's those moments that can ruin the reputation of bidding. But the majority of the time it is a very fair process, and as someone that's involved in the bidding process, you can usually tell if it's not a fair process. So times when it's maybe not fair or doesn't seem fair might be if it's something like, if you're building a really technical piece of software for the local authority, typically they won't have the in-house expertise, so they might engage someone to build the specification, and there's every chance that that person might try and tailor things to their expertise. But you can usually tell, it'll be really, really specific. It'll ask for things that you think, well, why is it asking for that? But most of the time it's pretty fair.
Yeah.
So we've been doing some work with the Cabinet Office to try and feedback our thoughts and understanding of the procurement process, and to give the opinion, share the opinion of small and medium-sized businesses around how we think things can be improved. And one of the changes that's going to come in, supposed to come in this month, but whether it's going ahead this month or not, I'm not sure, is every submission document will have details of how to raise a concern or a complaint. So the idea of that is just to try and give the sector a bit more, I guess, a bit more trustworthiness, if that's a word. Make it more trustworthy, so that if you are concerned that it's not a fair process, you know how you can raise a concern, who you can speak to, and what can be done about it.
Yeah.
So hopefully that'll improve perceptions. But yeah, 99% of the time it's a fair process. It's public money, and the public sector have to be able to evidence that they've spent it responsibly. So that they use EU procurement rules at the minute. Once we leave Europe, the anticipation, from what I've been told, is that they're going to move to World Trade Organization procurement rules, which are very, very similar to EU procurement, to be honest.
Yeah.
And they still focus on a similar thing, which they call MEAT, most economically advantageous tender, which to normal people like me means a balance of good price and good quality. And I think, we'll see that going forward. If we don't, we know where to complain.
Yeah. We've had a question come through, which is, do I need any accreditations to bid for contracts?
It's on a case-by-case basis. It depends on what the product or service is that you are going to deliver. If it's something that's highly technical or specialist, you will need some sort of accreditations. If you're going in there to deliver asbestos removal, you're going to have to show that you are competent, that you've got the right expertise, the right accreditations, quality standards, before they even consider you for that contract. If it's a contract such as a cleaning contract, where you need some expertise, you need some skill, but you don't necessarily need a specialist accreditation as a company to deliver that, then typically they might not ask for that. But it's usually in the documentation. It'll say, do you have accreditation X? And it'll say this is a pass-fail requirement. So they always set it out in the documentation. If sometimes it says it is desirable that you have an ISO standard. If it's desirable, then it's not essential, and you can say we haven't got it, but we've got these processes and procedures in place. Sometimes accreditations and quality standards can mean you don't have to fill in a certain section of the documentation. So it's quite common that if it's a construction tender and you have CHAS or construction line accreditation, that you don't have to fill in the health and safety section, because you've demonstrated your proficiency in that for achieving the quality standard. So that can be handy. But if they're asking for something and you don't have it, don't be afraid to ask the question. Or if you're unsure of if they definitely need something, ask the question. So the way that you can ask is, you can log into the tender portal, you can submit a question to the authority that's buying the product or service and say, is it essential that I have this qualification or this standard or this accreditation? And they usually come back to you and be pretty open about it. But just be aware that anything you ask through the portal, the response, not your question always, but usually the response goes to everyone that's interested in that submission. So that comes back to the transparency thing. If you ask them a question, the response will go to everyone so that everyone's on a level playing field. Everyone has the same set of information to work with when they're submitting.
That's great. We've had another question, Tim. So somebody's said that many businesses feel like tendering is just too much hard work and it can be quite a daunting process. Is it as scary as it seems?
I think the first time you look at a tender, it does seem like a scary process because typically there's lots of documentation, but it's a legal process. It is legally driven. What you write in the tender submission is legally binding. And that's probably the reason why the legal sector is very, shall we say, word heavy. But once you actually look at the documents and understand what's what, it starts to become a lot easier and a lot less daunting. So you'll understand that the terms and conditions are the standard terms and conditions of the organization you're purchasing from usually. And with a public sector organization, there's usually no room for movement on them. You'll start to understand that something like a SQ, a supplier questionnaire, is usually the same set of questions every time you submit. It's your company details, your insurance, have you been convicted of this, that, and the other? Have you got this policy? Have you got 3 years of accounts? Or can you evidence that you've got financial things in place to show you trading? So you'll realize that that's consistent each time. So that alone, that questionnaire can typically be 10 to 15 pages. But once you start it, a lot of it's tick box, and you'll realize that can be done in half an hour. And the main thing is to find the questions and the specification. The specification can sometimes be very wordy because they've got to describe exactly what they want, how they want it, why they want it. And I can understand that someone that's not used to reading a lot of content, that can be off-putting. The average tender submission from our point of view as bid writers to put together the written submission takes on average 3 to 4 days per submission. Some will take a lot less, some will take a lot more. And I think it seems like a lot to organizations because you typically have your day job. If I said to you, okay, Ash, in the next 2 weeks, you've got to find 3 days on top of your day job to write a tender submission. And I think that's where it becomes a daunting task. It's like, well, my days are full.
Yeah.
But if you can set aside the time to do it, in some real decent chunks of time, then I think it's a lot less of a daunting task. It's very difficult if you start dipping in and out of it and doing half an hour here and half an hour there. It can seem like a never-ending task. Mm-hmm. But if you actually say, I'm going to set aside all of this day or half of this day, then half of this day, that can really, I think that can make it a lot more of an easy process and a lot less of a daunting task.
And like you said earlier, if it's going to win you a 3-year contract, what's a couple of days for a 3-year contract?
Yeah, that's the thing. People, I'm probably a bit biased because I'm in the bid writing industry, but people compare it with business to business and going to events and things like that. And you think about if you're trying to win a 3-year contract of a significant value, you are going to have to put that time in to build a relationship with a client. You might meet them at an event, you might meet up for a lunch afterwards, you might go backwards and forwards with proposals, you'll meet and talk about contracts, and it's probably the same amount of time. But it just doesn't seem like it because you're not sat down typing or sat down with your calculator working out the cost as much as you would be in a tender process. But yeah, it's a risk and reward game, isn't it? You might put up 3 days worth of time, but if you really focus on those 3 days worth of time, you can win a real significant contract. you can usually get some good publicity off the back of it if you run some PR campaigns, and it does set you up for further contract wins. I think there's lots of companies out there who just win contracts. You know, some of the biggest companies in the country, if you look at the likes of Serco and Capita, huge companies, and you don't see them at networking events. They've got big bid teams that are bidding for government contracts, winning large scale long-term contracts. So yeah, it's it can take a lot of time, but it's about, is it worth it?
Definitely. So Tim, how exactly are bid and research development currently helping businesses with bidding? Do you have any examples?
Yeah, so we provide a number of different services. We're very flexible in the way that we work. We work with companies across all different sectors. We are not experts in any particular sector. Our expertise is in the bidding process, working with people who are sector experts to understand how they do things, why they do things, and to get across that on paper in a way which does them justice. Lots of companies we work with, they don't explain things because to them it's just everyday, but someone outside looking in, it's actually really interesting. So we help to bring out that how they do things, why they do things, that's understandable to the everyday person. The person that's marking a tender submission is not an expert in your sector typically. If they were experts in your sector, they wouldn't be buying the service. So we help with having that outside perspective to ask all the silly questions like, well, why do you do that? And how do you do that? And what does that achieve? So we do anything from reviewing submissions that people have written to helping people put together that framework before they bid, setting them off on their way, writing the submission, and then reviewing it when they're finished with it, right through to writing the full thing for them. We do it on a project by project basis, or we can do it on a retained basis where we become an extension of their team, and as and when the right tenders come up, we work with them to complete the submissions. Tenders can be a bit like buses, you know, they're all or nothing. So we offer a flexible team that can support as and when required, rather than having a full-time consistent overhead, which works well for a lot of our clients, especially small and medium-sized businesses.
Great, thank you, Tim, and thank you for joining us today. It's been great. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we go? No, I think thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for being wonderful hosts. If there's anything that anyone's got any questions about, feel free to reach out to me. I'm very active on LinkedIn. Just look up Tim Ward. I'm happy to answer any questions, to talk to people, to give advice. I'm very keen to try and be an advocate for bid writing. It's something that I'm quite passionate about, and hopefully that came across, and hopefully that coming across didn't end up me talking too much and too fast. But if there's anything that people have questions about that they don't want to ask in a public forum, drop me a message and I'll happily help any way I can, give advice and guidance and point people in the right direction. Great, thank you. And thank you for watching. If you'd like any more information, we have a number of articles and how-to guides to businesses if you go to our website at www.weareumi.co.uk, and you can also be part of the conversation in our UMI network on Facebook. So thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.